Hi, I'm Rob Word, and I love Westerns. Most of us do. That's why we're watching this show. One of the reasons that we produce it is to honor the people, the filmmakers, the men and women who have contributed so much to the genre. The genre is timeless. Many of the people who we lost last year have joined us for A Word on Westerns and have shared their memories in person, and they became good friends. And I hope they became good friends for you too. So let's start this tribute to those that we've lost. I want to thank you all for joining us through the years for A Word on Westerns, and thank especially those that we've lost. We will never forget you. Thanks again. Longtime friend Earl Holliman's acting career spanned almost his entire life. High-profile parts in a series of classics including Gunfight at the OK Corral, The Sons of Katie Elder, Forbidden Planet, and a co-starring role with Angie Dickinson in TV's Policewoman, made his charming smile and likable presence known the world over. Earl was born September 11, 1928 in rural Delhi, Louisiana. One of 10 children, Earl's father died before his birth, and he was given up for adoption and lovingly raised by Henry Earl Holliman and his wife. As a teenager working as an usher in a local movie theater, Earl became fascinated by movies and movie stars. He hitchhiked to Hollywood hoping to be discovered. Finding no work, he returned home, then lied about his age and joined the Navy. He was only 16. Earl's luck was about to change because he was assigned to a Navy base near Los Angeles and frequented the Hollywood Canteen. Upon his discharge, the aspiring actor attended classes at the Pasadena Playhouse. Extra work and small parts followed at 20th Century Fox with uncredited roles in Pony Soldier and Destination Gabi. A small part in the forgotten religious film Tennessee Champ as a goofy, punch-drunk boxer showcased his ability to portray lovable, not-so-bright characters, such as the cook in the sci-fi classic Forbidden Planet. In 1954's Technicolor CinemaScope epic Broken Lance, Earl excelled as the weak son of ruthless land baron Spencer Tracy. His brothers in the film were Richard Widmark, Hugh O'Brien, and Robert Wagner. Earl told me he loved working with and watching Tracy in this sort of precursor to the Cartwrights on Bonanza. The difference being that this was a very, very dysfunctional family. Broken Lance was followed by a series of top Western feature films including Louis L'Amour's The Burning Hills, starring Tab Hunter and Natalie Wood, George Stevens' Giant as the son-in-law to Rock Hudson and Elizabeth Taylor's characters, and director Fred Zinnemann's The Rainmaker, starring Burt Lancaster as Depression-era conman Bill Starbuck, promising rain and marriage to local spinster Katharine Hepburn. Earl is Kate's younger girl-crazy brother smitten with Yvonne Lime. Earl beat out Elvis Presley for the part and won a Golden Globe for his supporting role. It was his favorite movie. Lancaster so wanted the Rainmaker lead that he promised producer Hal Wallace that he would appear in The Gunfight at the OK Corral. Good call for both. Lancaster's Wyatt Earp to Kirk Douglas's Doc Holliday reunited him with Earl Holliman, who portrayed Earp's assistant, Charles Bassett, lending solid support to another A Western, this one directed by John Sturges. Cast as the Earp brothers were DeForest Kelley, John Hudson, and Martin Milner. Another favorite for Earl was his next, starring Joel McCrea as Trooper Hook and Barbara Stanwyck escaping from her Apache chief husband with her infant son. It's an excellent, underrated film with Earl as a fast gun who finds a bit of romance with Susan Connor. Hal Wallace again came calling to give Earl one of his most intense characters in 1959's The Last Train from Gun Hill. Earl is the son of cattle baron Anthony Quinn, an old friend of Marshal Kirk Douglas who now controls the town of Gun Hill. The film opens with Earl raping and murdering Douglas's Native American wife. Quinn refuses to turn over his weak-willed son, but Douglas swears to deliver him to justice by taking him on the last train from Gun Hill. It's an unforgettable performance by Earl. That same year, Earl was cast in the first episode to air of a new anthology series created, written, and hosted by Rod Serling, The Twilight Zone. The episode is entitled Where Is Everybody? And stars Earl as a man who wanders into a small town that appears to be empty. All the people are gone. It's atmospheric, frightening, and unusual. A first trip into the offbeat world of the classic series. Music by Maestro Bernard Herrmann perfectly sets the mood. Westerns were still TV's hot shows, and it was only natural that Earl Holliman, with his strong Western movie creds, would get a shot at his own TV Western series. It was called Hotel de Paris, created by Sam Rolfe, with the first episode directed by Robert Aldrich, premiering in the fall of 1959. Earl starred as ex-convict Sundance, who had killed a man whose widow and daughter run the Hotel de Paris. Not exactly a hero, Sundance has highly reflective mirrors in his hatband that could blind his opponents in gunfights. He also has eyes for both the widow, Jeanette Nolan, and the daughter, Judy Meredith. Or maybe they have eyes for him. Viewers never knew because the half-hour series only lasted one season. There was even a Dell comic book done in 1960 with a fairly good rendition of Earl filling the 4-color pages. For Earl's next TV series lead, he starred as champion bronc rider Mitch Guthrie in Wide Country, a modern-day Western set in the world of rodeo. It was like Route 66 for cowboys, with Earl traveling the West with his kid brother, Andy Prine, trying to keep the kid from pursuing the same lifestyle. Helping to give the show a sense of realism, former rodeo clown Slim Pickens was a semi-regular. Earl and Andy bonded during the series, which unfortunately only ran for one season. 1965 saw Earl guest star on Bonanza and The Virginian and appear with John Wayne, Dean Martin, and Michael Anderson Jr. as one of 4 brothers, the sons of Katie Elder, out to avenge the murder of their father and discovered who swindled their late mother. It was another A-Western from producer Hal Wallace. Director Henry Hathaway loaded the entertaining blockbuster with a solid lineup of supporting players, plenty of action, humor, and a fantastic score by Elmer Bernstein. Earl's 3 appearances on the classic Western Gunsmoke are A Man Called Smith, with Earl as an ex-con returning to ex-wife Jacqueline Scott so he can fence stolen gold to aid him in a flight to Mexico. Hackett, with Earl as a homicidal ex-con and Morgan Woodward as a coward, both playing against type. Fondly remembered by the 2 actors is a favorite episode in Shadler, written by Jim Burns with Earl as yet another ex-con, this time disguised as a priest. Always working in a variety of genres, Earl guest starred on many crime and medical series when the TV Western boom ended. In 1974, Earl was cast as Angie Dickinson's partner in Policewoman, a spin-off from producer David Gerber's own Police Story. In that episode, Angie's partners were Bert Convy as Crowley and Charles Dierkop as Royster. Luckily for Earl, he replaced Convy and became part of a hit show. Angie's Sergeant Pepper Anderson was a member of the Criminal Conspiracy Unit, working the wild side of the streets and back alleys of Los Angeles. She wasn't just passive, as TV women had been in the past. Pepper posed as everything from hot hookers, shifty ex-cons and prisoners, to gangsters, moles, and wet mud wrestlers, with Earl and Charlie Dierkop often coming to her rescue. Angie was in her prime, and this series was a prime-time hit. Earl and co-star Charlie Dierkop shared the same birthday, September 11th, and stayed connected through the years. Unfortunately, both died the same year, 2024. For 25 years, Earl was president of Actors and Others for Animals, an organization dedicated to the care of animals in need. Earl was a sweet and gentle soul, a major force in the world of animal care, and an actor who helped make many a production enjoyable. Earl Holliman died November 25, 2024, in hospice care at his home in Studio City, his spouse, Greg Curtis, told The Hollywood Reporter. He was 96 years old. With over 100 credits in her resume, including roles on some of television's most popular series, veteran actress Jean Allison should have been better known. Born October 24, 1929, she grew up in Tarrytown, New York, and attended Adelphia College on Long Island. That's where she met actor Lee Phillips. They married in 1951 when Jean was 22, and the marriage didn't last. Enrolling in Sanford Meisner's acting class, Jean was spotted while performing in a play and made her TV acting debut in $1,000 Gun, a 1957 episode of General Electric Theater. It was a Western starring George Montgomery, John Agar, Chuck Connors, and Lee Van Cleef, in a story about a gunfighter hired to rid a town of an outlaw gang. Jean's next TV role was as one of the leads in The Last Laugh, a 1958 episode of Have Gun, Will Travel. A not-so-funny joke perpetrated by Murray Hamilton has Peter Whitney placing a burr beneath the saddle of Stuart Whitman's wife, Jean. She becomes a cripple, and Paladin, Richard Boone, is blamed. It's a terrific part, and Jean delivers. Suddenly, Jean was in demand. In 1958 alone, she appeared in the feature film Edge of Fury and in 8 TV series, including The Restless Gun, Maverick, The Rough Riders, The Californians, and Trackdown. It was, after all, the 50s in the heyday of TV westerns. More work galloped her way the following year with appearances in 19 more shows, 8 of them westerns. Without slowing down, Jean made 18 more guest appearances during 1960. On a bonanza with Ben and Adam Cartwright locked in jail about to be hung, Jean is the witness who perjured herself, wanting revenge for her father's death. Called The Avenger, the episode featured Vic Morrow as a drifting gunfighter called Lassiter. It was filmed as a pilot, but failed to sell. Other 1960 westerns featuring Jean include Tombstone Territory, Bronco, Riverboat, Johnny Ringo, 2 episodes of The Alaskans, Tate, the Westerner, and Tales of Wells Fargo as a saloon hostess in an episode entitled The Killing of Johnny Lash, with Dale Robertson's Jim Hardy investigating the murder of a casino manager. Westerns continued to thrive on television during the 60s, and Jean was raring to go with the flow. She lent her talents for a nice guest-starring role on The Life and Legend of Wyatt Earp as entertainer Minna Marlin, who was saved by Marshall Earp from a smitten Sheriff Johnny Behan. She had roles on Wanted Dead or Alive and The Outlaws, a brief cameo in an episode of The Rifleman as a woman ravaged and murdered by book salesman Richard Anderson, and a terrific role as a two-faced woman with Gene Barry on a Bat Masterson episode called Ledge of Guilt, directed by William Conrad. Jean guest starred in 2 episodes of Laramie. In seasons 3, the Dynamiter's widow Jean wants a man in the house to help raise her son. She doesn't realize that wounded fiancé Russell Johnson is a bank robber being tracked by Robert Fuller. In season 4 on Laramie, Badge of Glory, Jean's the wife of Reverend Lynn McCarthy, a former bounty hunter who aids a wounded murderer, Russell Johnson. Yep, Russell Johnson again. That's the way TV series casting seems to have been done in the 1960s. Anyway, the Reverend was hoping to cash in for the reward for the construction of a new church. In Kiowa, the first of Jean's 2 Gunsmoke episodes, she plays the distraught wife of Victor French, who's hiding a secret from his sons. When his daughter is kidnapped by a band of Kiowas, the family, with the aid of Marshal Dillon, track them down. Only then does the audience and the kidnapped girl's brothers learn the truth. Their sister's real mother is a dying Kiowa, French had abandoned the tribe to live in the white man's world, marry Jean, and raise 2 sons while keeping his daughter's heritage a secret. The complex and surprising narrative is yet another reason why Gunsmoke lasted 20 years and continues to gain new fans through reruns. In 1978, Jean was in a 3-episode arc on how the West was won. She wasn't typecast in westerns. Jean worked steadily through the 70s and the early 80s in crime dramas, comedies, and medical series until retiring in 1984. Jean Allison's last appearance on TV was in an unusual episode of Michael Landon's Highway to Heaven. It was called A Divine Madness. A construction magnate played by Ron Moody is having delusions and thinks he is King Arthur about to lose his empire. Jean is his Lady Guinevere. It's another lovely, heartwarming story from the series, and for Jean Allison, a fitting end to a 4-decade-long career. Married 3 times, Jean and her second husband, F.X. Toole, the writer of $1 Million Baby, had a daughter before divorcing. With Philip Torvald, her third husband, she had 3 children. He died in 1994, and Jean did not remarry. Jean Allison died February 28, 2024 in Rancho Palos Verdes, California, at the age of 94. Actor Don Murray was nominated for an Academy Award for his first movie. The film was Bus Stop in 1956, casting the Broadway actor of Tennessee Williams' The Rose Tattoo and the Skin of Our Teeth in a starring role as a hopelessly in love rodeo cowboy. That object of his desire, sexy blonde superstar Marilyn Monroe, placed the film newcomer in one of the year's biggest hits. It seemed like a stretch for the Eastern-educated method actor Murray to play Bo Decker, a naive and overly zealous Montana cowboy, but it worked. The role not only got Murray an Oscar nomination, but it made him an instant movie star. Don was born July 31, 1929 in Hollywood, but grew up in New York. A religious-based conscientious objector during the Korean War, the drafted Murray was sent to Europe where he was assigned to aid war casualties and orphans. Many of Murray's later movies dealt with socially responsible, ripped-from-the-headlines themes. After having seen Don on Broadway, director Josh Logan brought Don back to California for the film version of Bus Stop. Logan had wanted Elvis Presley for the part, but Colonel Parker would have none of it. During an interview for A Word on Westerns, Don told me that while filming Bus Stop, director Logan was having trouble with Marilyn, showing up late and constantly missing her mark, making it very difficult for the cameraman to keep her in focus. Logan pulled newcomer Murray aside and told him, "Just grab hold of Marilyn and keep her on her mark." Following his Oscar-nominated role in Bus Stop, Murray starred in The Bachelor Party and A Hatful of Rain. His first traditional Western was the highly regarded Henry Hathaway feature From Hell to Texas in 1958. As a rifle-wielding ranch hand wrongly accused of murdering ruthless cattle baron R.G. Armstrong's son, Don is hunted by Armstrong's men and his other son, Dennis Hopper. From Hell to Texas was filled with compelling characters, top performers, including Chill Wills, Diane Barcy, Harry Carey Jr., Margot, and John Larch. The film's stunning locations were in Lone Pine and the Alabama hills of California. Dennis Hopper, channeling James Dean's style of acting, irritated director Henry Hathaway so much, it reportedly took 34 takes for one scene. When the film wrapped, Hopper was blacklisted from major studio movies for over a decade, ironically returning for a role in True Grit, directed by Hathaway. Don Murray's handling of his rifle, like a pistol in the film, was unusual and inspired the TV series The Rifleman. Murray was offered the lead in the series but turned it down to focus on feature films. Murray's next Western movie was a widescreen Technicolor epic based on A.B. Guthrie's sprawling novel, These Thousand Hills. Don starred in the rags-to-riches journey of a cowboy who will stop at nothing to gain financial success. Lee Remick, in a standout performance as a fallen woman, gives Murray help until he realizes her past will prevent his rise. Solid work from all involved in this modern Western directed by Richard Fleischer. One Foot in Hell is a noir Western written by Aaron Spelling about a man whose wife dies needlessly, and he goes on a vendetta, killing those he feels were responsible. Originally, Don Murray was to have had the lead, but when the man who played Shane became available, Don agreed to switch roles, and the lead went to Alan Ladd. During filming, Don thought it was strange that he ended up playing a drunk in the movie while Ladd got soused drinking vodka all day long, every day. One Foot in Hell is a bit of a disappointment, but does feature an interesting, cold-blooded performance by Ladd. Other interesting acting choices followed for Don, including the leads as the hoodlum priest, in Otto Preminger's All-Star Advice and Consent as a gay closeted senator, and 1965's Baby, the Rain Must Fall, again with Lee Remick and rising star Steve McQueen. Don followed those features with a trip to Spain to be top-billed with other expats for a spaghetti western. Directed by Don's co-star Richard Carlson, it's called Kid Rodello and is more like a straightforward American B-western than an anticipated spaghetti-style presentation. Based on a Louis L'Amour novel, Don stars as the Kid, just out of Yuma prison, with Janet Leigh the love interest. Broderick Crawford's performance is a far cry from his Oscar-winning turn in All the President's Men over a decade earlier. Don, an avid horseman, athlete, and boxer, gives another solid performance as he tries to beat his former partners to gold hidden from an earlier robbery. Don always gave credence to characters in period dramas. That's one of the reasons he was so effective in westerns. In a remake of Cecil B. DeMille's The Plainsman, Don stepped into the boots of Gary Cooper as buckskin-wearing Buffalo Bill Cody. Replacing Jean Arthur as Calamity Jane was Abby Dalton, with Guy Stockwell as Wild Bill Hickok. Don said he enjoyed making the film and working with Abby, although an accurate retelling of history, this 1966 version was not. But it was in color. Don took the lead in a TV series that helped break down the color barriers. It was a Western called The Outcast and teamed Murray with black actor Otis Young. The premise concerned an ex-Confederate officer who teams with a former slave to become bounty hunters following the Civil War. They are The Outcast, and both were fantastic. Don's easygoing Southern gentleman was matched by Young, the volatile ex-slave who had fought for the North. While only 26 episodes aired before cancellation, all of them have merit. The strong relationship developed between Murray and Young helped create a reality as they argued during each episode and kept the Civil War going even as they grew to respect and like each other. The stories dealt with themes that are still discussed today and was the kind of show that Don was proud to be part. It's a shame the series ended after only one season. Don starred with Roddy McDowall and Ricardo Montalban in Conquest of the Planet of the Apes, the fourth installment of the still-thriving franchise. He starred as a drunken rodeo clown Art Cotter in Cotter, and guest starred with James Arness, Eva Marie Saint, and Bruce Boxleitner in 3 episodes of How the West Was Won. In 1970, Don directed Pat Boone in the religious drama The Cross and the Switchblade, which he co-wrote. Don accepted the starring role in the primetime soap opera Knots Landing in the late 1970s. The series was a spin-off from the mega-hit Dallas, with several of the Ewings appearing in the series. Don starred as Sid Fairgate, a used car salesman with Michelle Lee as his wife. They had a large family, including their wild child teenage daughter played by Karen Allen. Karen disappeared after only a few episodes. Murray left in season 3, supposedly over a salary dispute. His character was written out as having died during surgery. Knots Landing, however, continued on the air and lasted an amazing 14 seasons. During the 1980s and 90s, Murray was reduced to mostly appearing as a guest star on popular TV series or in television movies. Don came out of retirement in 2017 with a recurring role on television in the critically acclaimed mystery series Twin Peaks: The Return. His last film was Promise, a low-budget Western filmed in 2021. Don was married twice. His first wife was actress Hope Lang, who had co-starred with Don in Bus Stop. They were married from 1956 to 1961 and had 2 children. He married actress model Betty Murray in 1962, and they had 3 children. It was a thrill when Don joined me for a word on Westerns at the Autry in 2019. I'd always liked his work, and his wonderful sense of humor and fun stories were a hit for me and the audience. He always delivered exceptional performances and was a joy to interview. Don Murray died February the 2nd, 2024, at the age of 94. Veteran actor-producer Tom Bauer was one of the most respected performers in town. Most known for his recurring role on The Waltons, Tom became an actor after attempts at several other professions and became a prolific, in-demand performer on film and on the boards. Whether it's stage, screen, TV, or the internet, there's not a genre or a form he didn't master. Tom was born January 3, 1938, and grew up in Denver, Colorado, never dreaming about becoming a professional actor. He had his sights set on a career in sports. Fortunately for all of us, Tom moved to New York City and was drawn to the acting profession, enrolling in the prestigious American Academy of Dramatic Arts. While studying at the John Cassavetes workshop, he landed an uncredited part in Cassavetes' low-budget, improvisational watershed film, Shadows, in 1958. Tom's love of acting grew, and he performed in dozens and dozens of plays before making the move to Hollywood, with his second wife, Ursula, eking out a living as a private detective while making the rounds for TV or movie parts in a variety of genres. He never stopped his live performances and was on the board of the prestigious Los Angeles theater, the Met, with fellow thespians James Gammon, Tim Scott, Amy Madigan, Ed Harris, Martin Kove, Paul Koslow, and Holly Hunter. Quite a group of talented performers. In 1992, I was honored to host a benefit and fundraiser at the Met with Robert Duvall and other filmmakers about Lonesome Dove. We called it An Intimate Evening with Robert Duvall. Tom always reminded me what a wonderful night that was. In fact, he was a wonderful man, always smiling and sharing the spotlight, joining us for the cowboy lunches at the Sagebrush Cantina on the Sunset Boulevard. When he came on screen, you knew you were in for something special. Tom became an in-demand character actor with nearly 200 screen credits, including appearances on Kojak, Beretta, The Rockford Files, Lou Grant, Barnaby Jones, Miami Vice, Dallas, and most other series of the 70s, 80s, 90s, and into the 2000s, with parts on Ray Donovan, Bosch, and comedies like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia and The Office. Tom was one of the producers of The Ballad of Gregorio Cortez, a little-known cinematic gem starring Edward James Olmos and a who's who of Hollywood's best character actors. It's a heartbreaking tale of racial inequity and a miscarriage of justice set in Texas in the early 1900s. Tom joined me for an episode of A Word on Westerns to reveal how the film got made. Can you make a classic with only $1 million? The answer is a definite yes. Tom's other westerns include Riders of the Purple Sage and Appaloosa, both directed by and starring his friend Ed Harris. Ballad of Little Joe with Susie Amos and Bo Hopkins, Desperado: The Outlaw Wars with Richard Farnsworth, The Avenging Angel with Tom Berenger, Shaughnessy, based on a Louis L'Amour novel, and Buffalo Soldiers with Danny Glover. Tom worked again with Ed Harris in Pollock, and with Bruce Willis in a scene-stealing portrayal of a big band-loving janitor named Marvin. The film, Die Hard 2. Tom is well remembered for his continuing role on the Waltons as Dr. Curtis Willard, who falls in love with and marries Mary Ellen Walton, Judy Norton. Working with writer-director Scott Cooper in Crazy Heart and Out of the Furnace, Tom added 2 more memorable portrayals in his large filmography. He was a lifelong member of the Actors Studio and a major supporter of SAG-AFTRA, serving on the national board from 1995 to 2002, making many contributions to the union and its members throughout his very long career. We were fortunate that Tom was able to join us on A Word on Westerns for an interview back in March of 2016. His loving wife Ursula was with him that day and shared in the fun of listening to his memories. She passed away in August 2023. They had been married since 1972. Tom died 10 months later, May the 30th, 2024. He was 86 years old. Roger Corman had movie star looks, but it was behind the camera that he left his mark. He became one of the most influential filmmakers in the history of movies. Roger William Corman was born April 5th, 1926, in Detroit, Michigan, moving to Los Angeles as a teenager with his family. It was while attending Stanford University that he discovered his love of film. After graduating in the 1940s, Roger worked briefly at 20th Century Fox in the script department. While there, Roger read a draft for The Gunfighter and suggested changes to strengthen the character, which were adopted by the director Henry King. In 1950, Gregory Peck signed on, and while not a financial success, The Gunfighter was liked by critics and today is heralded as a classic. Studio head Darryl Zanuck blamed the film's failure on Peck's insistence on having a mustache. Receiving little more than a thank you from the studio, Roger quit with dreams of becoming a producer-director. The 50s were boom years for Westerns, and Roger directed 4 of them. They were very low-budget excursions set in the Old West that he made before becoming known for his films based on the writings of Edgar Allan Poe. The Corman Westerns are Five Guns West in 1955, starring John Lund, Dorothy Malone, and Mike "Touch" Connors. Budgeted at $60,000 and shot in 9 days at Iverson's Movie Ranch, it was Roger's first credited directing job and was shot in color. The next was Apache Woman, starring Lloyd Bridges as a government agent investigating attacks that a town believes were done by Apaches. Bridges suspects otherwise. Roger's The Oklahoma Woman ramps up the exploitation, featuring sexy Peggy Castle as Oklahoma, who has a fistfight with good girl Kathy Downs. Touch Connors was back, this time as a black-hearted villain. Gunslinger, another in color, is Roger's last Western. It starred Beverly Garland as gunslinging Rose, who takes the place of her murdered husband as Marshall. The film also starred John Ireland, future 50-foot woman Allison Hayes, Dick Miller, William Shallert, Chris Alcade, and featuring a stunning movie poster. Of course, all 4 Westerns made a tidy profit. With the Western boom ending, Roger shifted genres at AIP, American International Pictures, for his popular film versions of Edgar Allan Poe, many featuring Vincent Price. Roger became known for giving young filmmakers opportunities, especially as directors at New World Pictures, a company he founded in 1971. One of those young filmmakers was director Steve Carver, whose coffee table book Western Portraits, The Unsung Heroes and Villains of the Silver Screen, was published in 2019. It's a tribute to the men and women who helped create the cinematic West and posed for a series of portraits taken by Steve in a style reminiscent of Edward Sheriff Curtis's immortal photographs. In the foreword for Steve's book, Roger Corman said of his early Westerns, "All 4 of my Westerns give women prominent roles. I did this because women exemplify an underdog position that appeals to me as a filmmaker, and their contributions to American culture and history have been too often overlooked. The presence of attractive actors like Dorothy Malone and Beverly Lund in these pictures was something that we could promote to ticket buyers, too. Although Gunslinger was the last Western I directed, my affection for the genre never diminished. I did finance a pair of westerns for a talented director named Monte Hellman, Ride in the Whirlwind and The Shooting. These films were shot in the southern Utah desert with Jack Nicholson playing leading roles in both. He was at a stage in his career when he was deciding between becoming a screenwriter and an actor. It was his script upon which Ride the Whirlwind was based. Roger continues. While we didn't make westerns at New World, the public's appetite for these films I felt had started to lapse. I would argue that many of our releases owed a great deal in terms of theme and visual style to the genre. If a Hollywood genre has been able to show American society how it sees itself through its crises and its aspirations, it's the Western. As long as this country exists, I suspect, these films will matter. In a long career producing hundreds of movies, Roger Corman continued working well into his 90s. His contribution and mentoring of talented newcomers over the years is unrivaled, and he received an honorary award from the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, an Oscar for his unparalleled ability to nurture aspiring filmmakers. His last credited production on IMDb is The Jungle Demon from 2021, but he also had several more films in development, including a remake, House of Usher, and a sequel of sorts, Little Shop of Halloween Horrors. These additional titles should bring Roger's production total to 500 films. Filmmaking legend Roger Corman died May 9th, 2024 at the age of 98. Mark Damon, co-star of Roger's first Pose success, House of Usher in 1960, died 3 days later. They could have been twins. Geoffrey Deuel and his older brother Pete Deuel look so very much alike. The talented brothers were both born near Rochester, New York, and are known for roles in westerns. Pete for Hannibal Hayes in Alias Smith & Jones, and Geoffrey for his portrayal of Billy the Kid in Chisholm with John Wayne. Geoffrey was born January 17, 1943, 3 years younger than his brother. They grew up outside Rochester, New York, where their father was a doctor. Pete had moved to Hollywood in the early 60s, and Geoffrey followed. Geoffrey made his screen debut on TV's World War II aerial drama, 12 O'Clock High, an episode called Graveyard. It was during the final color season of the series and guest starred Ossie Davis and Jon Voight. Geoffrey had a small part as a pilot. On Bonanza in 1967, Geoffrey was unbilled in Sense of Duty, the episode that introduced David Canary's character Candy. On Adam 12, Geoffrey's a student radical hazing Officer Martin Milner. Geoffrey Deuel's next role turned out to be the biggest of his career, Billy Bonney in 1970's Chisholm, with a big budget, a big cast, and Big John Wayne as Big John T. Chisholm, legendary cattle baron and rancher. The screenplay was written by producer Andrew J. Finity based on the bloody Lincoln County cattle war of 1878. Beautifully filmed in Durango, Mexico, Chisholm has so many storylines weaving through the movie that Duke is less the focus of the story than Deuel as Billy the Kid. It's a script that wavers between giving Billy a love story and his vendetta against the men who killed his mentor, British cattleman Henry Tunstall, making Deuel's portrayal less than menacing. The cast can't be faulted. Glenn Corbett as Pat Garrett, Andrew Prine, Richard Jekyll, Linda Day George, and Wayne Stock Company players, Ben Johnson, Bruce Cabot, Christopher George, John Agar, John Mitchum, Hank Worden, and Ed Faulkner, along with Forrest Tucker as the Chisholm adversary. Directed by Andrew V. McLaughlin and photographed by William Clothier, the film has a great look and plenty of action. It's a shame that Geoffrey's Billy the Kid didn't springboard him into leading roles in other motion pictures. Following Chisholm, Geoffrey worked on most of the top TV dramas of the 70s, The Name of the Game, in an episode co-starring his brother, The FBI, Cannon, Mission Impossible, Ironside, The Streaks of San Francisco, Barnaby Jones, and Mannix. His last Western was in The Driver, an episode of Robert Forster's modern Western series, Nakia, never getting an opportunity to star in his own series like his big brother's hit Alias Smith and Jones, whose shocking suicide still causes pain and heartbreak. Geoffrey moved to Florida, performing in plays and teaching. According to Michael Barnes in The Hollywood Reporter, Geoffrey died December 22, 2024, in hospice care in Largo, Florida, of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease at the age of 81. Veteran character actor Charles Dierkop had one of those faces, the kind of face you never forget. It stood him well for a career of supporting roles in over 100 films and TV shows, including a couple of multi-Academy Award-winning movies. Born September 11, 1936 in La Crosse, Wisconsin, Charles Richard Dierkop never met his father. His mother? She left when he was still an infant. Charlie was raised by his loving aunt and uncle. Dropping out of high school, he joined the Marines and served in Korea. With the GI Bill, he enrolled in the Actors Studio and remained a proud member for the rest of his life. Like many New York actors, Dierkop was given a break by producer Herbert Leonard, whose shot on-location series, The Naked City, was a launching pad for up-and-coming performers, like Martin Sheen, Robert Duvall, Nehemiah Persoff, Gene Stapleton, Christopher Walken, Robert Redford, Sandy Dennis, and dozens more. Charlie, appearing on the series 9 times, often uncredited, began to get noticed. He's an unbilled pool room hood in The Hustler, a Best Picture Oscar nominee starring Paul Newman with Jackie Gleason, memorable as Minnesota Fats. For Charlie's expanding scenes in Sidney Lumet's The Pawnbroker, he got more lines and billing. Moving west to Hollywood, Charlie was cast in a 1966 Gunsmoke episode, My Father's Guitar, with Beau Bridges and Steve Inett. He was so nervous, he kept blowing his lines, got mad, and stormed off the set. Legendary Western director Robert Totten, prone to temper tantrums himself, happened to be helming the show and took Charlie aside to counsel him. It worked. Charlie calmed down, returned, and delivered. It was the first of his 3 Gunsmoke appearances, including another one directed by Totten, The Newcomers, with John Voight and Carl Svensson. Westerns were still going strong in the 60s, and Charlie, spotted by casting directors, fit right in. He appeared on Bonanza, The Outcast, High Chaparral, Daniel Boone, Custer, Cimarron Strip with Stuart Whitman and guest star James Stacey, and again with Stacey on his Lancer series, and twice on Death Valley Days. Things were hot for Charlie, and getting hotter. In 1969, he was cast as Flat-Nosed Curry, part of the Wild Bunch in the classic buddy western Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Paul Newman and Robert Redford clicked in their first outing together. It was a showcase for all involved, including Charlie. Director George Roy Hill was so impressed he cast Charlie as Floyd, the bodyguard of Robert Shaw in Hill's Newman-Redford follow-up, The Sting. Both films were nominated for Best Picture Academy Award. The Sting was awarded Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Screenplay. Charlie also appeared in a Star Trek episode written by Robert Bloch, Wolf in the Fold, an episode of Marty Cove's Hard Time on Planet Earth called Rodeo, several Irwin Allen sci-fi fantasy series, and a biker film, Angels Hard as They Come, written by Jonathan Demme for Roger Corman's New World Pictures. 1970s westerns for Charlie include Kung Fu, Nichols, Cades County, Bearcats, Alias Smith and Jones, and a backdoor pilot, Lock, Stock, and Barrel with Tim Matheson and Belinda Montgomery. Charlie even appeared in the comedy western Dusty's Trail. Westerns were being phased out by cop shows, and Charlie was about to trade his Stetson for a cap and go undercover. In an episode of Police Story, producer David Gerber's award-winning anthology, a pilot film entitled The Gamble, starring Angie Dickinson as a policewoman who joins the Vice Squad run by Bert Convy. The pilot sold and evolved into the very successful series Policewoman. Convy was replaced by Earl Holliman, and both Dierkop and Ed Bernard from the pilot with Angie made up the main cast. Like Police Story, Policewoman always featured top guest stars, good production values, and solid scripts. It premiered in the fall of 1974, ran 4 seasons, and produced 90 one-hour episodes. Charlie continued working on episodic TV during the 80s and in low-budget direct-to-home video releases during the 1990s. His last released film was, well, seemingly unreleasable. Heaven and Hell was shot in the 90s and was unleashed in 2018. Check out Charlie's A Word on Westerns interview with me. A lot of his friends and co-workers showed up for his interview. He even came back to sit in the audience a couple more times. His appearance brought smiles and memories to everyone there, just like spotting him on TV and in his movies will continue to do. Charlie loved Westerns, especially Gunsmoke, and was still watching it every day. Charlie Dierkop reportedly suffered from a heart attack and died February 25, 2024. At the age of 87. Born in Glendale, California, January 27, 1941, into the legendary family of stuntmen, Jeannie Epper became a stunt person too. That's right, a stunt person. The Epper family is a stunt dynasty begun by Swiss-born horseman John Epper, who doubled Western movie heroes like Gary Cooper and Randolph Scott. John Epper's kids, Tony, Gary, Andy, Stephanie, and Jeannie, followed him into the business, and their kids followed them. The Eppards are 4 generations of stunt performers. Since the silent movie era, stuntmen have been dodging bullets, falling from horses, taking falls, and making action movie stars look good. As they aged, stuntmen became stunt coordinators and second unit directors like former rodeo champ and silent movie leading man turned stuntman turned Oscar winner Yakima Canutt. Women in the business of making female stars look good in action scenes have never been so lucky. In fact, they were practically invisible. Well, maybe stunt people were supposed to look invisible, keeping their dangerous profession a secret from moviegoers. In fact, before Jeannie and some of her peers entered the business, female stars were usually doubled by men. Look at stuntmen like Whitey Hughes or Dean Smith doubling Maureen O'Hara in McClintock, or Richard Farnsworth and a group of rugged-looking women. Just a few years later, Jeannie and her sister Stephanie worked with future director Hal Needham when they were taking falls for stars. The film was The Rare Breed in 1966. Hal was doubling James Stewart and Stephanie was doubling Maureen O'Hara. That's right, times were a-changin', with a trained stunt woman finally doubling a female star. Like her siblings, Jeannie learned to ride as soon as she could walk and made her credited film debut in John Ford's Cheyenne Autumn, filmed in Monument Valley. It was 1964 and Ford's last Western. She also rode, uncredited, in the Westerns The Hallelujah Trail and McKenna's Goal, before being selected to become both Barbara Stanwyck and Linda Evans' stunt double for 4 seasons on the Big Valley. Jeannie got caught on fire and hospitalized in an episode of the TV Western Lancer, doubled Lindsay Wagner on The Bionic Woman and Jill Clayburgh in the comedy Silver Streak. In 1978, she became the stunt double for TV's Wonder Woman, Linda Carter. It was a case of the greatest stunt woman doubling the greatest female superhero. Over the years, Jeannie would always praise Carter for her intelligence, friendship, and guts. The two made a terrific team. Jeannie made the A-list in A movies, making the action look good for Steven Spielberg and other directors in classic films like Blazing Saddles, The Towering Inferno, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, The Blues Brothers, The Life and Times of Judge Roy Bean, Blade Runner, and The Cannonball Run, directed by former stunt legend Hal Needham. She doubled Shirley MacLaine in The Terms of Endearment, skimming the surf in a speeding car. In Dynasty, she doubled stars Linda Evans and Joan Collins. In the futuristic action hit by director Paul Verhoeven, RoboCop, she doubled Nancy Allen. One of Jeannie's best-known gags was while doubling Kathleen Turner in the romantic action comedy Romancing the Stone. Jeannie swung over a dangerous 300-foot gorge and slid from the ledge of a slippery canyon, followed by Michael Douglas landing between her legs. The stunt gave Jeannie Epper added recognition and awards. It was also the funniest and most talked-about sequence in the blockbuster. A leader in helping other female stunt performers gain recognition and equal pay, Jeannie was a founding member of the Stuntwomen's Association of Motion Pictures and an honorary member of the Stuntmen's Association of Motion Pictures. A 2004 documentary, Double Dare, was made comparing and paying tribute to Jeannie and a younger female stunt performer, Zoe Bell. The documentary was directed by a woman. Jeannie Epper was a role model and a leader for women on screen and off. She helped women gain the respect, recognition, and remuneration that this dangerous profession deserves. Jeannie Epper died May 5, 2024 of natural causes at her home in Simi Valley. Her legacy and that of the Epper family lives on. Darryl Hickman was born July 28, 1931 in Hollywood. His father was an insurance salesman and he was soon to have a little brother, Dwayne. More about him later. Precocious Darryl started taking dancing lessons at the age of 3 and landed as a student at the famous Meglin School for Kiddies. Spotted by Paramount, Darryl made his unbilled film debut as Ronald Colman's son in The Prisoner of Zenda in 1937. Bing Crosby spotted cute, talented little Darryl while working with the youngster in The Star Maker in 1939 and suggested his talent agent brother sign him up. When that happened, everything changed for Darryl, and he became one of the most in-demand child actors of the 1940s. He played Henry Fonda's younger brother in John Steinbeck's story of dirt poor farmers leaving the dusty flatlands of Oklahoma for the promised riches of California. The film was John Ford's classic adaptation of The Grapes of Wrath. In 1941, Darryl appeared with Mrs. William Boyd, Grace Bradley, in a Poverty Row production of Jack London's Sign of the Wolf, and with the Dead End Kids, the Little Tough Guys, and Anne Gwynn in Mobtown. At MGM, he appeared with Hollywood royalty, Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn in Keeper of the Flame, Mickey Rooney and Tracy again in Men of Boys Town. He was young Johnny Smith with Robert Young in Joe Smith American. In Leave Her to Heaven, the classic film noir in color, Darryl plays Cordell Wilde's younger brother who meets with a wet death at the hands of unbalanced Gene Tierney. Even though Marie Dressler was no longer available, MGM's Oscar-winning star Wallace Beery was still his irascible self with a new co-star, Marjorie Main, before she became Ma Kettle. In this film, she's the owner of Jackass Mail. When Wallace Beery kills a man in a gunfight, he takes charge of the man's young son, Darryl, and together they deliver the Jackass Mail. Darryl smoothly aged into teenage and more adult roles. He courted a budding Shirley Temple in A Kiss for Corliss in 1949. With television sets keeping audiences in their homes, Darryl began appearing regularly on the small screen. For Gene Autry's Flying A Productions, Darryl was an amateur boxer helped by Jock Mahoney as the range rider, and was cast as a braggart on Autry's even more popular Annie Oakley, bugging the heck out of sharpshooting Gail Davis. In Danger Point, an episode of Sky King, Darryl is blamed for the murder of his uncle, Stanley Andrews, but the real murderer shows himself, endangering both Darryl and Sky's nephew, Clipper. Darryl appeared in 2 early episodes of The Lone Ranger. One of them was particularly special. It was called Two Gold Locket. Darryl, as Don Linden, recently released from prison, joining the notorious Carlos Marina gang. There's a flashback of a young Don that sets the story in motion. Young Don is portrayed by young Dwayne, Darryl's younger brother in real life. It's a fun episode, especially watching Ben Weldon, the short, bald, Ohio-born character actor known for playing gangsters and goons, struggle with a Mexican accent that comes and goes. Persuader is a forgotten 50s Western with William Tallman excellent as a murderous rancher terrorizing a Western town. When his twin brother is killed, Minister James Craig arrives to console his brother's venge-seeking son, played by Darryl. Tallman sweet-talks Darryl into joining his gang. It's an interesting role for Hickman as he's torn between loyalty to his family, love of his sweetheart, and a new sense of empowerment. That same year, 1957, Darryl appeared as a man about to be hung in Hang 'em High on The Life and Legend of Wyatt Earp with Hugh O'Brien, and in an episode of Sheriff of Cochise with John Bromfield. Incident, a 1958 episode of GE Theater directed by James Nielsen starring Audie Murphy as a Southerner. Set during the Civil War, Darryl played a character simply called Yank. Nielsen had previously directed Night Passage, a feature film starring James Stewart and Audie Murphy. Darryl appeared in two classic Western series in 1959, Wanted Dead or Alive. He's the hot-headed son of Sheriff Richard Arlen, leading a lynch mob to hang Steve McQueen's prisoner, Robert Strauss. Is he guilty or innocent? In an episode of The Tales of Wells Fargo starring Dale Robertson, Darryl is a robber, wanted for a killing he did not do. Mort Mills is the bounty hunter, the name of the 1959 episode. In Target, the first of two Gunsmoke episodes featuring Darryl, he's the weakling son of a brutal John Carradine. Seems some gypsies are on their property with a broken wagon and Carradine wants them off his land. In sort of a Romeo and Juliet scenario, Darryl falls for beautiful gypsy girl Suzanne Lloyd, while neither of the adult factions like that. The tale ends, sadly, in violence. Hey, it was Gunsmoke. It's one of the very early, good half-hour Gunsmoke episodes from 1959. That same year, Darryl starred with Vincent Price in one of producer-director William Castle's popular gimmicky ghost tales. This one featured Percepto, the most startling gimmick yet.
I'm William Castle, and I feel obligated to warn you about the next attraction you will see at this theater. The picture is The Tingler, which I directed. And for the first time in motion picture history, members of the audience, including you, will actually play a part in the picture. You will feel some of the physical reactions, the shocking sensations experienced by the actors on the screen. I guarantee that The Tingler has more shocks per minute than my last film, The House on Haunted Hill.
Vincent is a pathologist studying the dead bodies of executed prisoners. His theory is that fear creates a creature that comes to life when a person is too frightened to scream. Castle convinced theater owners to wire select seats that would send electric jolts and vibrate the behinds of audience members. You know what? They screamed. Darryl Hickman and Pamela Lincoln were the romantic leads, and they got married shortly after the film was released. They had 2 children, and the marriage lasted 23 years. Also in 1959, Darryl joined his brother on screen again. This time, it was in Dwayne's hit comedy, The Many Loves of Dobie Gillis. Guess what? They played brothers. Darryl was Davy Gillis for 3 episodes. The Americans was a memorable 1-hour network series that featured Darryl top-billed in stories set during the Civil War. I remember this series well. Darryl and Richard Davalos were brothers. Their father was veteran character actor John McIntyre. Both were corporals in the Army. The dilemma was that they were on opposite sides. Darryl was fighting for the North and Davalos for the South. Created by James Warner Bella, whose stories were the basis for John Ford's Cavalry trilogy, The series only lasted 17 episodes and, unfortunately, seems to have disappeared. In 1963, James Nielsen directed Darryl in the true story of Johnny Shiloh, the 10-year-old drummer boy who became an officer in the Civil War. No, Darryl wasn't the 10-year-old, too old for that. The film was top-lined by Brian Keith. Johnny Shiloh was played by Moochie. Kevin Corcoran. Hey, it was a Disney film. The historically accurate story originally aired as a two-parter on the Wonderful World of Disney before being released as a feature abroad and on home video. Darryl continued doing sporadic television guest spots on series throughout the 1970s and moved into a very prolific voice actor career working on dozens of animated series. On Broadway, he replaced Robert Morris in the original production of How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying. As a producer, he worked for Norman Lear's sitcom A Year at the Top in 1977, reporting to his younger brother Dwayne, who had become a production executive at CBS. Darryl Hickman has over 150 titles in his resume. He was very compassionate about young performers because he felt that he had missed out on having a regular childhood. He began working at the age of 6 during the golden age of Hollywood and has left a wide variety of performances on film. Darryl Hickman died of undisclosed causes May 22, 2024, in Montecito, California. He was 92. Actor, singer-songwriter, soldier. Captain Kris Kristofferson, the star of Sam Peckinpah's Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, a soldier? Yep. Born June 22, 1936 in Brownville, Texas, Kris Kristofferson was the son of an Air Force general who wanted his son to follow him into the service. A Golden Gloves boxer and a Rhodes Scholar at Oxford University, Kris joined the U.S. Army, becoming a helicopter pilot and achieving the rank of captain. Disappointing his father, Kris left the service, moving to Nashville with dreams of becoming a country songwriter. Finding no interest in his songs, Kristofferson made a living as a commercial helicopter pilot. His break came when he landed his chopper in the yard of Johnny Cash and delivered several songs to the country western legend. Taken aback by the brash young man, Cash responded by recording a couple of the songs. One of them, Sunday Morning Comin' Down, became a hit and was voted Song of the Year by the CMA in 1970. The wild life of a rock star followed as Kris partied, wrote songs including Me and Bobby McGee recorded by Janis Joplin and Roger Miller, performed, and partied some more, making his film debut in the drug-infused Dennis Hopper extravaganza, The Last Movie, Hopper's follow-up to Easy Rider. Kris followed that small part with the title role as a former drug dealer in Cisco Pike. He was a last-minute replacement for Seymour Cassell, and his billing was Introducing Kris Kristofferson. Songs were added to the story, including Kristofferson's own Lovin' Her Was Easier and Breakdown. At that time, writer-director Sam Peckinpah was looking for an actor to portray Billy the Kid in what turned out to be Bloody Sam's last Western, Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid in 1972. When Peckinpah saw Kristofferson performing at the Troubadour in L.A., he screened Cisco Pike and then cast the 36-year-old singer as Billy Bonney, who had died at the age of 21. 44-year-old James Coburn was cast as 30-year-old Pat Garrett. Even though the film was taken away from Peckinpah and was severely re-edited or hacked, depending on what story you hear, the movie had a stellar cast of veterans and many unforgettable moments. One of them tied directly to Kris. He'd introduced Sam to someone the director had never heard of, Bob Dylan. Cast in the small fictional role of Alias, Dylan ended up scoring the movie. His song, Knockin' on Heaven's Door, was used to underscore the tragic death of Slim Pickens' sheriff in the film's most emotional and memorable sequence. Kris made 2 more films for Peckinpah, including the mega-hit Convoy with Ally McGraw and Ernest Borgnine. With a natural charm and charisma, Kristofferson was very effective on film and became a full-fledged movie star. There was an honesty in his music and his film performances. Other early roles graced by his charismatic portrayals include that of the rancher befriending Ellen Burstyn in Martin Scorsese's Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, a football player with Burt Reynolds in Semi-Tough, the doomed rock star opposite Barbra Streisand in the 1976 remake of A Star Is Born. In fact, some movie fans only knew him as an actor, not a successful country music star. With Jeff Bridges, Christopher Walken, Sam Waterston, John Hurt, Joseph Cotten, and hundreds of others, Kristofferson was top billed in Michael Cimino's all-star disaster, Heaven's Gate. Beautifully shot, and now with a growing number of fans, the overruns on the movie's original budget caused the huge out-of-control production to take down the venerable United Artists. Kristofferson weathered the Heaven's Gate disaster with a series of other, less expensive westerns, including several with his friends and fellow music legends, the Highwaymen, Johnny Cash, Willie Nelson, and Waylon Jennings. They recorded 3 albums together. In the movie, The Last Days of Frank and Jesse James, Johnny was Frank and Kris was Jesse. That was followed by a disappointing TV movie remake of Stagecoach, with Kris replacing John Wayne as Ringo, Waylon Jennings replacing John Carradine as Gambler Hatfield, Johnny Cash taking the George Bancroft role as the Marshal, John Schneider replacing Andy Devine, and with Willie Nelson appearing as Doc Holliday, replacing no one. The Tracker, also known as Dead or Alive, was a solid western filmed in New Mexico, with Kris tracking down murderous religious zealot played by Scott Wilson. The script was by Kevin Jarre, soon to write the classics Glory and Tombstone. Pair of Aces and its sequel reunited Kris with pal Willie Nelson in a modern-day western. Kris was a troubled Texas Ranger and Willie a lovable safecracker. Their on-screen camaraderie helped make these 2 films enjoyable. Kris showed his dark side, his very dark side as a corrupt sheriff in writer-director John Sayles' murder mystery, Lone Star. Kris was adept at comedy, too, which was on display in Sodbusters with Fred Willard, written and directed by Eugene Levy. Kris was also in the Civil War drama Pharaoh's Army, Blue Rodeo, 2 for Texas, and again with Willie as 2 aging gunfighters in The Long Kill, directed by Bill Corcoran. Kris narrated writer-director Burt Kennedy's passion project about the only U.S. survivor of the Battle of Little Bighorn, a horse named Comanche. Kristofferson also lent his sonorous voice to the Western fantasy series Dead Man's Gun for 44 episodes. He was cast as Andrew Jackson in the 5-part miniseries Texas Rising. Kris was also in several hit movies as a vampire hunter, Whistler in Blade and its sequels, in Dolphin Tale and its sequel, and in Tim Burton's reimagined Planet of the Apes. Even with roles in lesser westerns, The Rights of Ransom Pride, Traded, Hickok, and Lawless Range, his last western, Kris never lost his charm or his appeal to his fans. During his long career, Kris Kristofferson amassed not only appreciation from fans, but awards honoring him both for his music and his acting. Among them, 13 Grammy nominations and 4 wins, including one for Lifetime Achievement Award, a Golden Globe for Best Actor, a CMA Award for Song of the Year, 2 Western Heritage Awards, and a Golden Boot Award. Married 3 times, once to Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid co-star and singer Rita Coolidge, Kristofferson said he was most proud of his children. Later in life, Kristofferson admitted to alcohol and substance abuse. His prolific body of work on film and in the world of music, which he helped to change, is a legacy that will continue to entertain and inspire. Kris Kristofferson died September 28, 2024 of undisclosed causes at the age of 88. Actress Janice Paige is best known for her Broadway musicals and long-running roles on daytime soap operas. but she lent her considerable scene-stealing talents to several westerns. Born Donna Jaden, September 16, 1922, in Tacoma, Washington, she was discovered in Hollywood singing at the Hollywood Canteen and quickly got signed to appear in the all-star Warner Brothers feature movie supporting the war effort, The Hollywood Canteen, as a studio guide. Over the next 50-plus years, she would appear in over 100 productions. At Warner's, now as Janice Paige, she became a frequent leading lady to contract players Dennis Morgan and Jack Carson, sometimes, like Two Guys from Milwaukee and The Time, the Place, and the Girl, with both of them at once. Her first Western was Cheyenne with Dennis Morgan in 1947. Not to be confused with the studio's later television hit Cheyenne starring Clint Walker as Cheyenne Bodie, only the title was used for the TV series. In the feature, Janice and Jane Wyman are aboard a stagecoach headed for the Wyoming town, with Dennis Morgan as a fast-drawing gambler out to capture the Sundance Kid. Some cute repartee between the three enlivens this fun Western, directed by Raoul Walsh, written by Alan LeMay, later to write The Searchers novel. Cheyenne is rumored to have been set up as an Errol Flynn Western, a follow-up to his hit movie San Antonio. Janice even gets to show off her singing abilities with 2 songs in the film. More singing for Janice followed in the Delight. A starring role with Dennis Morgan was next for Janice in 1948's One Sunday Afternoon, previously filmed with Gary Cooper and Fay Wray in 1933, and again with James Cagney and Olivia de Havilland, titled The Strawberry Blonde in 1941. In 1949, Janice was back in the saddle as fast-drawing, sharpshooting Kate Shepard, who wants to join up with the Younger Brothers, played by Robert Hutton, James Brown, Wayne Morris, and Bruce Bennett, in the action-packed Western. The gunslinger female role was a change of pace for the musical comedy star. Janice was terrific and effortlessly steals the film from the cast of rugged outlaws. The traditional romantic lead went to Geraldine Brooks. Moving to New York in the 1950s, Janice finally gained the stardom she deserved in Pajama Game. It debuted on Broadway in 1954 with hit songs, huge crowds, and glowing reviews. The disappointment came when Janice just missed recreating her role in the 1957 movie version. Her part went to Doris Day, with John Raitt repeating his role for the film. That same year, Janice co-starred with Fred Astaire and Sid Charisse in Silk Stockings, Ruben Mamoulian's musical remake of Ninotchka. On film in 1960, Janice worked again with Doris Day in Please Don't Eat the Daisies as the other woman to Day's movie husband, David Niven. Television was beckoning, and Janice starred in an original fantasy musical for CBS called The Secret World of Eddie Hodges that was directed by Norman Jewison. The young actor played himself. Jackie Gleason, who composed the music, observes, comments, and narrates as Eddie's dreams of Hugh O'Brien, Boris Karloff, Bert Lahr, and Janice come to life. She was the title character in the Nellie Jefferson story, an episode on Wagon Train, with Janice as a legendary singing star demanding special treatment. Wooster is smitten with her. The episode also features H.M. Wynant and was directed by Virgil Vogel. In between appearances on most of TV's top comedy and drama series, Janice Paige was cast in the brutal Western Welcome to Hard Times as the wife of Keenan Wynn.
Ada!
Yeah!
Hitch up the horses! And don't take all day!
Ah, shut up!
Love that woman.
Based on the novel by E.L. Doctorow with a script by director Burt Kennedy, the film's story of a psychopath who terrorizes the rural town of Hard Times starred Aldo Ray as the psycho and Henry Fonda as the mayor whose weakness allows Ray to kill several citizens. Originally produced as a TV movie, it was deemed so violent that it was, instead, released theatrically. Janice guest starred with James Garner on The Rockford Files and again with Garner on his Brett Maverick series. She was a regular on the CBS comedy western series Gun-Shy, starring Delta Burke, Tim Thomerson, Jeffrey Lewis, Barry Van Dyke, and Pat McCormick. It was based on the Disney movie The Apple Dumpling Gang, but only lasted 6 episodes. No Man's Land was a delightful 2-hour Western movie pilot starring Stella Stevens as a widowed, gun-twirling sheriff with 3 daughters by 3 different men. The cast included Janice, Robert Webber, Sam Jones, Dak Rambo, and Melissa Michelson, Terry Garber, and Donna Dixon as Stella's girls. It's a shame this one didn't go to series. TV westerns and movie musicals were out of fashion, and Janice moved into the daily grind of soap operas with continuing roles on General Hospital and Santa Barbara. However, she had replaced Angela Lansbury on Broadway with the lead role in Mame, toured as Annie and Annie Get Your Gun and Mama Rose in Gypsy, among others. Her last Western was as Richard Dean Anderson's mother in the secret agent Western Legend in 1995. Her final screen appearance was in 2001 on Family Law. It was an episode about a man on trial for the mercy killing of his dying wife called The Quality of Mercy. Janice Paige retired that year and lived another 23 years. Janice had an amazing, diverse career, and her films still entertain. She was married 3 times. Her last husband was composer Ray Gilbert, who died in 1976 and wrote the Academy Award-winning song Zippity-Doo-Dah. Janice Paige died June 2nd, 2024 of natural causes. She was 101 years old. Longtime saddle pal and Western legend Phil Spangenberger died September 26, 2024 in Prescott, Arizona. He was one of the giants in preserving Western film history. A devastating loss to all who knew him or read his numerous articles in Guns and Ammo and True West. Phil's love of the genre was unmatchable. He was born May 11, 1940. A Florida boy like me, we connected early with our shared love of Westerns. We were both influenced by Fess Parker, the Davy Crockett craze, and the proliferation of Westerns in the 50s and 60s. Moving with his family to Southern California as a teenager, Phil discovered a group of Civil War reenactors and became immersed in the era. After acquiring truckloads of discarded period movie costumes and props, he founded Red River Frontier Outfitters in 1970 to sell them and then authentically recreating them when he sold out. He was a good friend for over 40 years. Riding with him and the Hole-in-the-Wall gang in Wyoming every year, or at his ranch north of L.A., or working on the Golden Boot Awards committee with him and others, always preserving Western film history and honoring those deserving filmmakers, made the time go by quickly, and always with lots of laughter. Spangenberger was beautiful on a horse and worked many Wild West shows, performing his trick riding and mounted shooting all over the world with unbelievable skill. He consulted on films that include Clint Eastwood's Unforgiven, Viggo Mortensen's Hidalgo, and coached stars like Charlton Heston and Will Smith on how to handle 6 guns and do fast draws for film roles. He'd even taught Mel Gibson how to do trick shooting for a memorable scene in Gibson's Maverick feature film. Who could forget watching Phil lead the Spirit of the West Riders in the Rose Bowl parade every year in support of the John Wayne Cancer Foundation? Millions watched on television. Phil got his Golden Boot Award in 2005 and was honored as Westerner of the Year in 2002 by True West magazine. Phil Spangenberger seemed ageless, joining many of us for years at the monthly cowboy lunches held at the Saddle Ranch Chop House on the Sunset Strip. Those gatherings evolved into a Word on Westerns, having lunch and doing interviews at our new location, the Autry Museum. Phil always seemed to be there. He'd had heart issues for several years and had retired to Prescott, Arizona. He called me a couple weeks before he died, and we talked and laughed for about 45 minutes, looking forward to getting together for a ride in the Tonto National Forest with other Hole-in-the-Wall gang members in the spring. Such a special person. I couldn't match his skill as a horseman or a shooter, but our passions both seem unstoppable. Phil Spangenberger has stopped now, at the age of 84. But even as he rides with the ghost of his Western heroes, his legacy and long life of contributions will live on and on. He is missed. Rest in peace, cowboy. Canadian Donald Sutherland isn't particularly associated with Westerns, but he did make several that contributed to the genre, including his final role as Judge Parker in Taylor Sheridan's Lawman, Bass Reeves. Donald McNichol Sutherland was born July 17, 1935 in St. John, New Brunswick, Canada, with early thoughts of becoming an engineer. Upon graduating from the University of Toronto, he had developed a passion for acting, so the 6'4" Sutherland moved to England, where his unique look and enthusiasm were put to work in a variety of British TV series, including The Avengers and The Saint. Sutherland played 3 parts in the black and white feature The Castle of the Living Dead, starring Christopher Lee. Shot in Italy, the film was also released and re-released as The Torture Chamber of Dr. Sadism, and The Snake Pit, and The Pendulum. 2 other cult suspense films, both 1965, followed Dr. Terror's House of Horrors, with icons Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing, and Die, Die, My Darling with Tallulah Bankhead and Stephanie Powers. Sutherland's roles were getting larger with each film. Robert Aldrich's 1967 seminal World War II movie, The Dirty Dozen, was shooting in England. The actor originally cast as the hippie GI prisoner, one of the dozen, quit just as production was to begin. Lanky Sutherland, with his comedic presence, wild look, and instant availability, took the $600 a week gig. An important scene in the film had one of the Dirty Dozen dress up and pretend to be a visiting general. The bit was to be played by Clint Walker, but when he felt uncomfortable with the sequence and refused to do it, Aldrich put Sutherland in the part. The scene was hysterical, became a highlight in the film, and a breakthrough for Sutherland. His performance in the blockbuster led director Robert Altman to cast him as the lead in another war film, this one a little 1970 dramedy set during the Korean War. It was called MASH and became another hit movie. Sutherland introduced the character of Surgeon Hawkeye Pierce, the role Alan Alda played in the TV series. That same year, Sutherland was cast in yet another war comedy. He was Sergeant Oddball, one of Kelly's heroes, starring Clint Eastwood. In 1974, Sutherland returned to Canada for Dan Candy's Law. It's based on the true story of a First Nation Cree fugitive who eluded capture for over a year in the northern wilderness. Sutherland is Dan Candy, the Mountie on his trail. Other films with Sutherland showed his chameleon-like ability to become likable or menacing characters in a variety of films, including National Lampoon's Animal House, Clute, Don't Look Now, Eye of the Needle, the remake of the sci-fi classic Invasion of the Body Snatchers, Ordinary People, Casanova, Backdraft, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and Space Cowboys, reuniting him with Clint Eastwood. Sutherland was constantly working in all genres, but returned to Canada for yet another portrayal as a Royal Canadian Mounted Police hunting another man on the run. They always get their man, and Sutherland is a mean one, tracking down Lou Diamond Phillips as a young Eskimo who killed a white trader in self-defense. In the epic Civil War drama Cold Mountain, starring Jude Law, Nicole Kidman, and Renee Zellweger, Sutherland played the Reverend Monroe. He was a lawman in Dawn Rider, a 2012 remake of John Wayne's 1935 Lone Star B-Western that starred Christian Slater in Duke's role as a man with a deadly vendetta, and Donald Sutherland as a marshal out to capture him. Duke's version had more action and was shorter. With nearly 50 years in the business, Donald Sutherland found a new generation of fans with his continuing role as President Snow in the blockbuster franchise The Hunger Games, which began in 2012. Sutherland returned to the saddle, this time with his talented young son Kiefer in the western Forsaken. It was a dream project for Kiefer. They played father and son, with Kiefer, a bitter gunslinger trying to forget his past and make amends with his father, a reverend in a town that's under siege by violent land grabbers. There are some wonderful scenes with the two as they come to an understanding. The film was shot in Canada with Kiefer's longtime friend, director John Cassar, director and producer of Kiefer's hit series 24. Donald Sutherland's last role was as Judge Isaac Parker in Taylor Sheridan's miniseries Lawmen Bass Reeves, with David Oyelowo, Dennis Quaid, and Lauren Banks. Of the many attempts and variations that have been based on the life of Reeves, a real Old West lawman, this was by far the best. It's nice to go out on a winner, and that's exactly what Donald Sutherland did. After a long life of delivering mesmerizing, unique, and unforgettable performances on both the big and small screen, he rode off into the sunset in a film that did justice to another legend. Donald Sutherland died June 20th, 2024, in Miami, Florida. He was 88 years old. John Strong's larger-than-life presence was matched by his 6'5" height. When he made an entrance, attention shifted to him. Suddenly, joy and laughter filled the room. Producer, actor, parent, grandparent, John Strong's life was well lived. He was born December 3, 1936, to a Sicilian father and a debutante mother who graced many a magazine cover. He grew up in New York leading a very blessed life, riding to school in a limousine, but following his cowboy dreams always rode horses from a very early age. Moving to Hollywood in the 1950s, the boom year for TV westerns, Strong worked as an actor on the Warner Brothers lot, becoming friends with the stable of western stars, especially Colt 45 leading man Wade Preston. Years later, Strong acquired from Preston the twin Colts he wore and shared stories with me and our A Word on Westerns audience about the guns. You see, John was a shooter, too. He shot skeet with Robert Stack, pistols with Robert Forrester, and was a regular at the Charlton Heston Celebrity Shoot. Another Western connection was working on Stony Burke with producer Leslie Stevens. That rodeo series starring Jack Lord, Bruce Dern, Warren Oates, and Casey Tibbs only lasted 1 year, but was followed by the successful fantasy series The Outer Limits that Stevens produced for ABC. Strong went along with the production team. At Universal, John acted in the westerns Riverboat and The Tall Man and became a producer on McCloud with Dennis Weaver. While there, he was reunited with Leslie Stevens again as a producer for the TV movie pilot Probe, starring Hugh O'Brian. The pilot was successful, and Stevens got a green light for the spin-off series Search, starring O'Brian and Doug McClure. Strong also produced and created the title design for the series. Other films from Strong include Heart Like a Wheel, starring Bonnie Bedelia and Beau Bridges, Steel Justice with Martin Kove in his first starring role, and Cop, written by James Elroy and starring James Woods. John Strong was the life of the party and brought laughter and camaraderie wherever he went. He loved the mountains, playing cards, shooting trap, skeet, pistols, smoking cigars with friends, and he especially loved his family. A jokester, a protector, a big teddy bear of a man. With failing health, he was confined to a wheelchair, bleeding internally and having transfusions twice a week. Surrounded by his family at his home in Palm Desert, California, John Strong passed peacefully October 1st, 2024, at the age of 87.
I return to the fields of glory where the green grass and flowers grow, and the wind softly tells the story of those brave lads from long ago. March no more, my soldier laddie, there is peace where there once was war. Sleep in peace, my soldier laddie, sleep in peace, now the battle's o'er. Some return from the fields of glory to their loved ones who held them dear, but some fell in that hour of glory and were left to their resting here. March no more, my soldier laddie, there is peace where there once was war. Sleep in peace, my soldier laddie, sleep in peace, now the battle